Why don't we get started? So first of all, thank you for joining today. This is our regular series, the Coffee Break Technology series. Today, my name is Josh Moore. I'm a Senior Solution Architect with Alevity. Today, I'm going to be joined by my colleague, Nick Bambulas. How are you doing today, Nick?
Doing well, Josh. How are you on this somewhat cloudy Friday?
Oh, doing fantastic. You ready for a good weekend?
Absolutely, absolutely. Playing some golf this weekend, which I haven't done in a few weeks, so pretty happy about that.
Good. Well, excited today to talk to you about budgets and help our audience a little bit dial it in so they can provide amazing IT for their areas of expertise and industries. So first of all, to kind of open up, today in today's day and age, I think more so now than ever, doing good budgeting for organizations is absolutely critical, right? Need to look forward, be able to plan, be able to understand, what kind of technology investments are going to be on the priority list for the coming year, as well as kind of managing, fellow executive peers to help them understand, what needs to happen, and those financial decisions that could potentially impact, the business and, where you're prioritizing those dollars and where you're not prioritizing and thus, things that can't be accomplished. So why don't we dig in on the list of questions? So, to start, what trends and pain points are you seeing across businesses related to their technology spend and how they're planning for the coming year?
Well, a little bit of that landscape has changed. I mean, obviously, there's been some major changes in the world over the past year, and
Yeah.
that's caused a pretty drastic shift in some of the priorities, some of the top priorities in IT budgets. As some of you are probably already aware that a lot of organizations had to pivot rather quickly to create a mobile workforce and enable their folks to work remotely. And now that we're kind of getting past the front side of everything, and we're getting some regularity back in our lives, a lot of organizations have adopted kind of a hybrid work model, or perhaps even if your organization hasn't adopted that model, maybe your clients and customers have. And so we've seen folks change their budgets to kind of adapt to that kind of workforce. So we've been seeing laptops replacing desktops. We've been seeing more interest in remote access tools and cloud services. And the cloud services thing has been growing for quite some time, but really the changes from the pandemic have really accelerated that growth. Seen a lot of changes in demand for cloud services or cloud servers, and they're becoming a bigger and bigger focus of IT budgets moving into this next upcoming year.
Yeah, that's a really good point about, supporting the mobile workforce. I've seen the exact same thing, and it's what I'm actually seeing companies do now is, they pivoted to support that remote workforce, but now a lot of them are circling back around and saying, how do we secure our data, with these remote workers? So I'm also seeing that happen now, where there's additional investments to protect from phishing attacks, ransomware. Are you seeing a lot of that with the customers that you work with as well, Nick?
Yes, absolutely. Because a lot of organizations had to move so quickly to get themselves into the remote working area if they weren't there already, and now they're starting to play a little bit of catch up because they've had time to kind of take their breath and catch their breath and look at things they may have missed when they rushed into getting everyone set up to work from home when things moved very quickly, a year or so ago. But yeah, definitely starting to see that increased focus on security and making sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed with all of the remote technology that was, really rushed forward very quickly back in the spring of 2020.
Yeah, just kind of building off this topic, and I think it's one our listeners are definitely kind of tuned into and likely resonates with a good deal of them. Those investments in that remote workforce and those security, if you're not making them, important to make sure that there's an awareness of the risk of not investing in those things. So yeah, and important to have that transparency. From that standpoint, let's talk a little bit about the budgeting cycle. In your opinion, Nick, kind of when is the best time to start that budgeting cycle?
Well, in my experience, I've always kind of looked at it as a budgeting season, and
Yeah,
generally it starts. Let's say your fiscal year end is December 31st, and so
yep,
usually you want to start that cycle, that planning season, when that fourth quarter starts. So once September rolls around, that's the time I'm getting my goals out from the previous year, and updating my priorities and looking at my must-haves and my could use and my would be nice list to start identifying what those priorities should be,
yep.
based on the changes in the organization, the changes in the business, and what goals senior leadership has put forth, so that I can align the technology with those organizational goals.
That is refreshing. I have to say that in my experience as well, the sooner the better, right? And September, if you're on a fiscal, that aligns with the calendar, you got to give yourself enough time, not only to work with potentially your own internal IT team, but also you're going to have business partners, right? You're going to have managed service providers, that you're going to need data points on warranty renewals, ideas for better securing that workforce, as well as and I'm sure you've experienced this. You got to engage business units, right? Line of business, and what are their plans, as well as executive staff. To make sure that they're aware of kind of where you need to be investing money and how it'll potentially impact spending in those lines of business. Have you had similar experiences, Nick, and how have you kind of navigated some of those discussions with the various business partners and internal department leadership?
Yeah, and that's a really great point, and you need to leave yourself enough time to talk to individual department heads, whether that be accounting or HR or whomever, because they're all going to have their own unique goals for the year and things that they want to accomplish. And more often than not, their goals are going to require some sort of technology investment or change. And it's something that IT leadership and those in charge of IT decisions need to be keenly aware of, because um, you know back in the day, IT departments definitely were a little bit more self-centered in those types of efforts, and they were more concerned about the things that the tools that they could put in to make their lives better. But it really has to be a holistic approach where you're looking at every business unit within the organization, making sure that you have a clear picture of what their goals are, so that you can help assist them to make their goals get accomplished, or just make their workforce more efficient so they can accomplish those goals that are driving the business. And then,
Yep.
like you said, engaging with senior leadership. Let's say that you're an IT director or even maybe an office manager who oversees IT. You're going to have a conversation with your CFO or perhaps even your CEO about well, why these decisions, why these IT projects are impactful for your organization, and what benefits they're going to bring forth. And you kind of have to build the value and show why these solutions are going to be valuable to the organization. And it takes time to do all those things. One, to educate yourself, and then two, to educate your colleagues and leadership team on the benefits of those solutions.
Yeah, and keep in mind, right, Nick, that during the course of that budget cycle, you also got to keep doing your day job. So I want
That's
to make
right.
sure you give
That's
yourself
right.
enough time to do it. So all right. So when it comes down to budgeting, in my experience, the simplest tools to be able to utilize for being able to, have a level of transparency and prioritization and do all the financials, is really Excel. And I think a lot of organizations take that approach, right? Just a great tool. And I think that there's a variety of other systems that you're going to be pulling from, right? Financial systems, internal, maybe doing a historical look back, potentially tools that are provided by your managed service provider. Are those kind of the portfolio of tools that you've used in the past, or is there some other tool that I'm unaware of that maybe makes things a little bit easier?
No, I don't really have a magic bullet type of tool
Yeah,
for budgeting process, but your finance team is going to have something in their ERP system that they're using to track this type of things, and
yeah,
they're going to have their own methods depending on the industry you're in, the vertical you're in, the types of products that you use to run your business day to day.
yep,
But like you said, Microsoft Excel is probably the most common tool that folks are using for budgeting purposes, and that runs the gamut from IT departments to accounting departments to senior level leadership, and it's kind of the de facto go-to tool. But as far as gathering information to build that budget, like I said, talking to each department is going to be key. But from an IT standpoint, if you're an internal IT person, pull things out of your RMM tool, your inventory tools, so that you can track life cycles of equipment.
yeah,
And if you do not have an internal IT department and you're working with a solid managed services provider, they should be able to provide you um, inventory lists and life cycle documents showing and giving you those recommendations on when products should be replaced, how long they should be lasting, when you should be investing in XYZ technology. And organizations like us, like Levity, we're constantly having those conversations with our clients. We talk on a quarterly basis about IT strategy, which most of the time includes budgetary talk, and making sure that we have our ear to the ground of what's changing and where life cycles are at, so that we can be prepared for those budgeting cycles.
yeah. The excellent. And the other thing that I've had success with in the past during budgeting is having a shared portal. Maybe it's a team set up, a channel, that all of that information can pour into for the IT budget. That subjective information that's coming from the line of businesses, your internal analysis. Obviously want to keep some of that data confidential, but making sure that there's a method for continued engagement and collaboration across the business is something that I've found to drive success of the budgeting process. So as you're getting through these budgets, and you meet with leadership, and there's kind of that plan around, hey, these are the investments that we need to make to right the ship a little bit. um, a lot of executive leadership likes their business metrics. How are we measuring IT? How can we incorporate that into the planning and budgeting process? And this is something I think really differentiates good IT, I'm sorry, amazing IT versus just the regular run of the mill shops. Do you have any thoughts on what kind of metrics you really want to manage throughout that budget cycle?
Well, I mean, obviously, the biggest one is going to be costs, but
Yeah,
really, what it comes down to is looking at the organization's goals for the coming year. Any leadership team is going to have some sort of direction or input, or view of what the next fiscal year is going to look like for their organization. They know, based on the trends of their industry, whether or not they're going to have a good year or a bad year. They kind of got that feel. They may not know the exact numbers, but they know if they're going to have a growth year coming up or if they're going to have a hard year coming up, and that's going to affect budgets not just for IT, but across the board. So really having those conversations with senior leadership early to kind of get those ideas and goals established, and look at the IT projects that are on your plate as well as the other departments within your organization, and you'll have to prioritize which ones are going to bring the most value to help accomplish the goals that the executive leadership is laying out.
yeah, and great feedback. And in my experience with doing budgeting as well, right? Cost is definitely the primary element that you're looking at, but there's also the duration of that implementation and project, right? You also want to kind of take a look at how much organizational energy, right? And sometimes technology, it's clicking a checkbox and everybody kind of falls into line, but in other ones, it's a great deal of change. We're moving people's cheese, and there's a little bit more organizational energy. And I think it's also, kind of important. What are the scope of the projects that you're going to be taking on? Because oftentimes it's just a one little line item. We're upgrading client security. Well, what is that? Is that antivirus? Is that endpoint detect and respond? So it's not only the capital and operating costs, but how much energy that you're going to need to invest in, and what's going to all be accomplished within that. And then, the three wheels of any IT project, right? It's, you've got cost, you've got the scope, and when that project is going to be completed. And, in my experience, you kind of want to make sure that you're not overburdening that IT staff, or making sure that you're aware of what the capabilities of that IT partnership that you have, and their ability to deliver. Any thoughts on that, and making sure that's a part of your budget process?
Well, I was just going to add on to what you were saying, and not only looking at the scope and workload of your IT team, but also looking at how it's going to affect other departments. Because some of these projects that you're probably going to work into your budget are invariably going to either involve other departments because it's going to be their software that you're working on, or they're going to have some sort of input into that system. So the number of projects and how they affect each department in the organization is something to look at as well, because like you said, you don't want to overburden folks working on the project, whether they are IT resources or resources from other departments that are involved in that project. Increasingly as time goes on, we see much more involvement from individual departments with IT projects, because IT literally crosses into everything these days. And in order to have a successful implementation of any project, we need to have the key stakeholders involved. And if it's HR software, HR better be there. And they're going to have their own they're going to have their own input. They're going to have their own schedules and workloads to balance. And it's a complicated puzzle, but that's why we have good project managers, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and IT in a silo without engaging the business, definitely a risk as far as hitting the target. So IT departments, the executive leadership, they create this IT budget, for the coming year. In my experience, it's a little bit of a living document, right? You've laid the best plans you can during the year end for the next fiscal coming year. Do you see that as kind of a living document over the next year, as revenue changes potentially happen, or things that are happening in market potentially increase or decrease revenue? What are your thoughts on that as a living document?
Yeah, I agree. I agree that it's a living document, and there may be some CFOs out there that don't like to hear that, because accounting folks like to have good, solid numbers. But I think that's one thing that's definitely been getting more attention over the past year, right? Because we've seen as a society how fast things can change. Whether it's the remote workforce, and how that how the pandemic affected industries, or now all the logistical problems that we've been experiencing in multiple industries.
Yeah.
Or even sadder news, how organizations are affected by crypto locker and ransomware attacks, and how that the ripple effect kind of carries through an entire industry or an entire region of the country. If we look at
Oh,
things
yeah.
like Colonial Pipeline, and how that greatly affected just gas prices in the southern United States. And things change very quickly in today's day and age for a variety of reasons, whether it's climate change, or, and God forbid, another global pandemic, or
Yeah.
or ransomware, crypto locker attack, not necessarily for you or one of your clients, but someone big in your industry. And that has large repercussions throughout the nation or the world, as we've seen. And I think in today's day and age, we just need to be flexible and we need to be able to adapt very quickly to a changing landscape.
Yeah, yeah, and I totally agree with that. Kind of that cascading impact, and the oil pipeline attack was definitely something that we saw impact a number of industries, right? Not just that direct measurable cost to the pipeline organization. So you don't think a lot of people in 2019, when they were working through their budget cycles in Q4, they didn't predict that pandemic and the extra spend?
No,
Yeah,
probably not. I mean,
probably not, right?
so
Yeah.
far off the radar for most of us that was probably inconceivable at that point.
Yeah. And so, and this kind of brings me back to, kind of having transparency with that executive staff of, not only what they're spending and investing in, but the risks associated with not investing things. And I think you and I both know, Nick, that it is something that if you are a security conscious organization and want to make sure that you're protecting your business from downtime or being impacted by phishing, ransomware, viral activity, that you need to invest in these things. But the risk of not investing in these things is something that executive leadership needs to know. How have you approached that in the past, and have you had a good amount of success socializing that with your executive staff?
And I have, and sometimes it's a work in progress depending on what level in the organization IT leadership resides. If you're an IT director, you're most likely reporting to a CFO, who's then reporting to a CEO, and so you're kind of, and sometimes in a lot of organizations, it's common that you're kind of explaining your needs and the impact to one person who then has to take it to someone else. And a lot of those ideas get lost in translation,
Yep.
or maybe the CFO can't easily interpret the value of the technical needs that you put forth in the budget. And they make a best guess or a best effort when they're trying to justify things to the CEO, but sometimes it doesn't always work out the way we had planned. And it's really important for the IT person who's creating that budget to have a seat at that table with senior leadership, be alongside them when the budget is getting built, so that you can explain the impact and the value and all the things that are important to the organization, and maybe the repercussions if we don't invest in this, what could potentially happen. And there's usually no one better qualified to do that than the IT director or CIO, and it's important to have a seat at that table. And likewise, if you're working with a managed services provider, a lot of managed services providers like us will be providing you a virtual CIO to help guide you through this process. Bring your VCIO to those senior leadership meetings. Have them talk to your CFO if you're the office manager that's involved with overseeing that group or that partner. Make sure that everyone is in the know and gets to hear the talk of why these solutions and projects are important, and how they'll be impactful to the organization's security, and also the pitfalls if you don't do some of these things.
Yeah. And I think it's important as well. And in my experience, coming to an executive leader after any downtime experience the following budget year to do the "I told you so," likely not a good idea. Probably a resume generating event. So,
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
You usually don't need to do that. Usually they've figured that part out, and then they may be coming to you for the next budget. You're saying, so what can we do to not have this happen again?
Yep, yep. And that was actually, as far as questions from the audience, that last one was one of their questions. So thank you for all your questions. I know we don't have a lot of time to get to everybody's questions, but thank you very much for joining me to discuss today, Nick. It's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you on the budgeting process.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, and then so for our attendees, just want everybody to know that we do these every Friday, and we have a lot of interesting events coming up. I encourage you to go out to levityit.com/events to register for any upcoming events that we do have. And we've got some exciting things on the radar, right? Upcoming, we have the Azure virtual desktop. Fantastic way for people to be able to remotely work, but still have control over that environment to meet your security needs, as well as power the line of business applications that you need within an environment that can be quickly stood up and has a good deal of flexibility. So definitely encourage you to access that recording, levityit.com/AVD. So please go out there and take a look at if you're interested in securing that remote workforce, but having the flexibility to get the connectivity into those line of business applications. And of course, the main reason everybody joins, I'll leave this slide up. Go out there, claim your free coffee. It's something that we do for our attendees to thank you for your time and attendance. So I'll leave this up for just 1 second. Hopefully you've all taken your camera, pointed at that QR code, and have already clicked on the link or clicked into that or typed out the typed form. So, to wrap things up, I just wanted to, Nick, thank you once again. Really great catching up with you on a Friday. Very valuable insights, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend.
Thanks, Josh. You as well.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Good. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Have a great weekend.